Senator, thanks for joining us this morning. And I don't know, 2, 3, 4 months ago, one of the first times you actually broached the possibility that it wasn't a slam dunk that the virus was originated in a wet lab. Did you have any of the recent evidence that has brought a lot more people to your side and at least admitting the possibility that it wasn't in a wet lab, that it was generated in a P4 lab that really wasn't run that well?
Yeah, Joe, I didn't have any kind of classified intelligence or secret information. It was really just reading the news from China and medical journals and following the inherent logic of events. We knew as far back in January, thanks to some scientific research published by Chinese scientists in The Lancet, that the early persons who were infected with this virus, about a third of them had no contact with the wet market whatsoever. We also, based on the best evidence available, knew that that market, which was mostly a seafood market, didn't sell the kind of bats from which this virus is believed to have jumped from bats into humans. What we did know is that there were 2 labs in Wuhan that deal with coronaviruses, that China has a long record of bad safety practices, as we now know our State Department officials in China were worried about 2 years ago. That's all circumstantial evidence. There's no direct evidence, but there rarely is in intelligence matters. But I think the American people are entitled to use their common sense to look at those labs as the most plausible explanation of the origin of this virus, especially when you consider all of the lies by the Chinese Communist Party and what they have done to intimidate witnesses and destroy the evidence.
There will never be anything more than circumstantial evidence in all likelihood, Senator. So what does that mean the United States should do in relation to China's actions? We've already got, I mean, it's an important trading partner. We just signed a trade deal. Is this a time for punitive action which could hurt economies around the world, including our own?
China is a pariah state, and it's not just the United States that recognizes that. More and more countries are beginning to recognize that they need to bring manufacturing out of China and back to their home countries, like Japan has done with billions of dollars in subsidies. Or they shouldn't be taking the multi-billion-dollar loan shark operations that are called the Belt and Road Initiative. So it's not just the United States that's doing this, but it's well past time the United States begin to bring manufacturing back to our shores, especially in critical areas like pharmaceuticals and medical devices and supplies and telecom and other advanced technologies. Now, the unfortunate fact is, because of decades of failed trade policy, China does have a substantial market share of some of those critical goods. So we don't want to take any precipitous steps that would hurt the health of our people, but we also don't ever want to be in this situation again, nor do we want to let China corner other critical markets all around the world, whether it is masks for healthcare workers, rare earth elements for the technology industry, 5G technology, pharmaceuticals, or anything else.
Senator, wanted you to react to an interview that Dr. Fauci gave to National Geographic magazine just within the last 24 hours, and he says quite emphatically that there is no scientific evidence that the coronavirus was made in a Chinese lab. He goes on to say that I don't understand what people are talking about, and he says I don't spend a lot of time on this going through what he calls a circular argument. What do you make of that?
So Dr. Fauci there is referring to a distinct question of what we were discussing earlier, whether the virus was genetically engineered or modified in any way. That gets into some very technical scientific details. The scientific consensus at this point is that the virus was naturally occurring, but a virus can be naturally occurring and still result from a lab outbreak, because we know that they were using bats in those labs in Wuhan. They were researching the coronaviruses that can come from those bats. There are legitimate purposes to do that, whether you're looking for testing or therapeutic drugs or vaccines. That does not eliminate the possibility, though, of an accidental breach, of air filtration systems not working, or someone being infected in the lab and walking out and starting to infect others in Wuhan. So that's a different question, a logically distinct question from whether the virus was genetically engineered or modified in any way. And, that's beyond my scientific ability, but the scientific consensus at the point until we study the virus more carefully is that it was a naturally occurring virus, but of course a naturally occurring virus can be found in a laboratory as well.
Yeah, that was 2 weeks ago, that it was a naturally occurring virus. There was, there are certain conspiracy theories that it was genetically engineered and genes were added or subtracted from a bat genome deliberately by the Chinese military. No one's saying that because it has been determined it's a naturally occurring virus, but there are laboratories over there doing a lot of research on bat viruses, and some of the circumstantial evidence that you point to is that the person that one of the original patient zeros had no contact with the wet labs, and there's a couple other things that I guess Pompeo is probably using that. But you think it's all going to come out, Senator? That anything that gets someone like Secretary Pompeo to be so definitive about it, or that the evidence is weighing that way? Do you think that eventually that all sees the light of day?
Well, I hope so. I published an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal last month that laid out the case that the circumstantial evidence all points to the laboratories. Nothing points to the seafood market in Wuhan. Again, on intelligence questions, it is rare to have direct evidence, to have conclusive proof. You have to use your common sense and weigh all the evidence. When you do that here, at least for the time being, until the Chinese Communist Party can produce evidence to the contrary, the most plausible explanation is that this virus originated in a lab.
And so you think there's going to be some global response to China to hold them accountable, not just the United States. You think that is...
Well, yeah, and not whatever the origins of it as well. I mean, look at how China reacted to it. They lied to their own people. They lied to the WHO and the world for the month of December. Even after they knew the virus was highly contagious, it was obvious to anyone in Wuhan and Beijing, they allowed international air travel to continue. I think that was a deliberate decision because they did not want to have their economy crippled by a virus that only affected their economy. They chose to let travel continue internationally outside of China while lying to the world about the transmissibility of this virus. I think that was an intentional decision to ensure that the virus affected the economies of all of their trading partners, and especially their chief rival, the United States.
All right.
Hey, Senator, I just had one quick geopolitical question. Meg Terrell on our air yesterday was reporting that Gilead's remdesivir was going to be taken over by the federal government in terms of how it was going to be handed out and taking control of. And I'm curious, as we get vaccines, hopefully, and as we get other drugs, how you think that those should be distributed? Do you think they should be shared with other countries? And what do you think the implications of keeping them all in the United States, if in fact that's what we decide to do, will be?
Well, I think the most immediate question is the question of manufacturing production. The science obviously takes some time to get right, but one of the biggest bottlenecks we could face is scaling up a working therapeutic drug or vaccine. So we have 330 million doses for the American people, but also so we can produce the hundreds of millions or billions of doses the world might need. And I think if we can get those therapeutic drugs or get those vaccines, once we can protect our own people, certainly we should share them with the world as well. One reason why we've invested money on the front end, though, to start building up manufacturing capacity is because no private company would do that until they know they have a working drug or working vaccine. But we don't want to take the ordinary course of business where you have a long and slow buildup. So we're going to invest very robustly in a lot of manufacturing capability. Some of it may end up not working. We may be scaling up for drugs or for vaccines that end up not succeeding in the final trials. But I'd rather make that investment on the front end so we don't have any bottlenecks on the successful drugs or vaccines that our scientists and medical researchers will hopefully discover very soon.
I don't have the keys, Dan. Anyway, thank you, Senator. I have the thing. Thank you. It's good to have you on, and who knows? It says that everywhere. It's never going to be more than circumstantial. So, I mean, I can't believe the type of hoopla I see just when we even discuss it, because to a certain contingency, they claim that it's to try to I guess cast blame aside from the Trump administration. I don't know. They go crazy with even if you even broach a possibility that China might be at fault in some way. They go nuts. It ruins their whole narrative. Anyway, thank you.